Hello and welcome. Now in this set of slides what we're going to be looking at is we're going to look at the basic structure and the basic plot devices that are being used in the film. So without further ado, let's just get straight into it. Like plays, films are also divided into acts. Now you may not notice this, but each film script that gets written will be divided into a set of 3 acts basically. Now you might be wondering, well, how do I tell them that they're in 3 acts? Usually you don't. Now, because of the fact that there are 3 acts in a film, you might be saying, well, is there a structure as well? Again, there is, but you don't really need to talk about it so much. It's just to give you a basic idea of how a film might be set up. So you won't normally notice the jump from one to the next. In older kinds of films where there was an intermission halfway through filming, then yes, you would notice probably a jump from one scene to the next. But in most modern filmmaking, seeing as we don't really need intermissions because they're just wasting our time, all films do is just jump from one to the next. Now a good example of actually where they do come in is in TV shows. So they do form a structure, but in TV shows it's where they put in ads. So you will notice them in then. But in terms of films, and mainly the HSC text that you'll be looking at if you are doing a HSC, or if you're doing any other film for that matter, will be a film. And when you're looking at a film, then they'll be 90 minutes to an hour to however long, 2 hours or however long they are. And they will also be set up in such a way where each of the acts will correspond to a particular moment or event in the film. So even though they might not necessarily jump like a play would, they still have a sort of some significance, but again, it's not one you really need to talk about, just one that you need to be familiar with. So you may even look at this as a formal structure. So a setup, confrontation, and resolution. Now, this is the Hollywood structure. And basically it means that your setup is you're introduced to your main characters, you are told about them, you find out about where they live, they're all established. Then your confrontation is when the events start to happen, the things that start to complicate things in your story, sort of like your complication when you write a narrative. And then your resolution is your events, not just the resolution itself, but the events that lead up to it. So all the things that lead up to the great climax of the film, where things start to be put back together again. That is the third, that's basically the 3-act structure in a nutshell. Now, it's basically like any other narrative structure that you'll see. So in terms of having a beginning, middle, and end, and that's even what some film groups call it, just a beginning, middle, and end. And that's a particularly appropriate way to talk about it. It's just saying that in any kind of narrative, in any kind of storytelling, there is something which has to happen, some sort of conflict or confrontation, something which changes the nature of it for a narrative to take place. And so when you're looking at this, you can look at it in terms of basic structure, but then you can focus straight from there onto other structures and devices which are used to tell a story. So you're probably more interested in plot, and that's what we're going to focus on now, which is the film structure is more important because not only is it a narrative as well, but the storyline is mainly what is at the heart of each film, and what gets people overall to watch a film is what's in the story, what makes it worth watching for people. Yes, other factors such as star power and special effects, having the right kinds of people in the films, having the right amount of explosions in the film will get people to go and watch it. But at the same time, they're also sort of hoping it would have a plot in there somewhere. So that is what is needed for it to make sense. And each plot has a technique, just like you will find when you're studying a novel or a play. Now, they each have techniques that you should be looking for as well, and we'll go through some of them in a moment. These are techniques which basically either drive the story or may even alter the story. So what I mean by altering a story is basically your plot twist. So it might be something which just moves the story forward bit by bit, or it might be something that completely turns the story around on its head and is significant, meaningful, whatever it may be. So let's just go through a couple of examples of those. A flashback, which is one of the more common ones, particularly for when your character is going back to their childhood. And we learn a bit more about them from the things that they did when they were a child or something along those lines. Some films are told entirely in flashback, so they start at the past and work their way into the present. And it depends on the context of the film, and also the idea of what the film is trying to put out there. Basically the whole point of the film is to structure its story in such a way where you have a beginning, middle, and end. And the flashback is one way where you can just depart from that structure a little bit and go into other areas. A dream sequence, which you also commonly see in a lot of films, is basically it's a daydream or a dream, something which isn't really happening. Now you might think of soap operas or something like that that use commonly used dream sequences, but it's virtually everything. So to have a look at those sorts of things, and particularly dreams are quite meaningful often in films, and you'll find lots of symbolic techniques in those, and very deep and meaningful sorts of things. Narration. So some stories are driven purely by a voiceover. So it might be a character, it might be someone else in the story, it may be someone we don't even know who is talking about the story just as a voice only. So we don't see them, well, we might see them, but we don't see them speaking. So they're just telling the story as if they're reading it aloud. Jump cuts or a montage. So if you've seen a lot of films where they're improving but they don't want to have to show it in 20 minutes, so they try and show it in 2 minutes, that's essentially your montage. And it's just jumping from one scene to the next. Now a jump cut is to make the transition between one scene and the next appear a little bit more simultaneous or sudden. And that's used for a particular meaningful effect, whether it be just to quicken the pace, it might be to link two people together, it might be just to tell a story in a particular kind of way. The climax is where every film gets to. It's their dramatic conclusion. It's the big battle at the top of the cliff face. It's all those things. So it's even in the comedy film or something along those lines, there's usually even then some sort of climax, some sort of crescendo that the film is building up towards. It may happen right at the end of the film, it might even happen at the beginning, and then they work backwards from that. It may have multiple climaxes, but they are things to look for, and particularly the elements that you'll be talking about a lot in your essay or whatever it is you're writing about in terms of your film study. And finally, misdirection, which is a particular way of shooting a film which is pointing you basically towards a plot twist. So it's essentially trying to put facts in such a way that, or put elements of the story in such a way, should I say, in such a way that when people watch it, they're meant to believe one thing and really the other's going on. And so that plot technique is particularly important for a lot of films, lots of twists and turns, and particularly films with a lot of complexity and something that's quite deep as well, is that they'll have some sort of misdirection in there, something that will make you change your mind about a particular person or something that's happened in the film. Alright, now what are the meaning of these plot devices? Well, that's up for you to decide. It's not for anyone really to tell you what a particular element of a film means. Now, there might be some common ground and you may come across some things which seem obvious, but you still need to explain them anyway. So you need to find things that are relevant, obviously, to your analysis. So if you've got a question which is asking you for a particular theme, obviously you'll be looking for film techniques that are to do with that theme and not things that aren't to do with that theme. Now, as I said before, this is the simplest way to do this is to pick some important or very climactic moments. So if you do find those moments in the film, one of the things that you can do is not only discuss important sections of the film, but also be able to identify what techniques in those sections make the film stand out a bit more or make that particular scene important. And these scenes will also be the ones most worthy of discussion. So as I said before, they'll be the ones you're discussing anyway. You'll be discussing the cliff-top battle scene or whatever it may be. And you'll do so in a way where you will refer to those techniques and why they make that scene important or why they make that scene special. Alright, now you may also want to name scenes as well. And this is for when you're writing a response about a film and you're going, okay, how do I talk about that scene? How do I talk about the scene where it's the one where he walks into the house for the first time? The best way to do it is just to come up with a name for a scene. Now, seeing as you don't get a name given to you, you can come up with your own name as long as it basically points to what it is you're talking about in the film. So, using the DVD chapters, for instance, in when you pick up a DVD or something along those lines, have a look for those, because they will give you some ideas of some names which other people can interpret as well. And if someone else has the DVD copy of the film, then immediately they know what you're talking about. They're talking about scene 18 or whatever it may be. But you still need to refer to some sort of name for it, just so it's easier to talk about. Now, it's as I said, it's not as simple as a novel or a play where you can refer to a scene number, a line number, an act number, a chapter number, all those things, because you won't have that luxury in films. So you just got to basically come up with your own name, describe it, maybe give a little bit of detail about what that scene's about, and then discuss what techniques are in it and what makes it important. And as I said before, make sure it's something your marker can pick up on, because if you come up with this really clever name for it and they have absolutely no idea what you're talking about, they have to think long and hard. Meanwhile, they're trying to understand the point of what your writing is, and that's a little bit problematic. You don't want your marker to be sort of going, "I don't remember that scene," when really you mean something that's one of the biggest scenes in the film. So it's just very simple to come up with just an ordinary name, something which just tells you exactly what the scene is that you're referring to, and then you can just go on with writing about it. You don't have to focus on it too much more. So that's about it, really. There's not really a lot more to plot devices than that. Just basically the idea that films are told in a particular way and narrative structures are very different for each film. And it's up to you in your analysis to talk about not only what kinds of narrative structures are there, but to also write a response which makes reference to these plot structures and why they are effective and why they create meaning in the film. So the more you practice looking at films and the more you can pick up on even just some of those simple devices, and you really only need a few of them, then the easier it is to analyze your film, to talk about it, and to come up with a constructive argument and a analysis of it based on what you find. So really that's about all there is to it. So until next time I see you, I'll see you later.